Hello and welcome to another episode of Stream It or Leave It. Today I'm going to be talking about the new show, the first episode of Dopesick. So I've been following the Sackler family / Purdue / Oxy case on and off for a few years now, so I knew that I'd find this really interesting before going in. There's been so much information released over the years that it's nice to have it all together in this format, even though I know that some parts have been fictionalized. It is a show after all. Plus Michael Keaton and Caitlin Dever are in this, so I was all in. So in the 90s, we open with Richard Sackler giving a speech about how pain is preventing people from living their lives and how he wants to change this. A seemingly righteous villain at first, but we already know that it's the family business's bottom line that fuels his ambition. You see, Purdue's patent on OxyContin is about to expire, and this will destroy the company because it makes up 25% of their sales. Richard decides that he wants to design a newer drug based on their existing formula, but for long-term use. I'm paraphrasing here to avoid using too much medical jargon that I have no knowledge of, but that is the gist of it. Anyway, the company knows that this will be a hard sell to doctors, but they're determined to do it. Even the high-level executives who kind of have cold feet still have dollar signs in their eyes. Then we see some kind of hearing in the early 2000s where officials are asking doctors about the sales pitch that Purdue gave them about Oxy, and especially Purdue's claim that less than 1% of patients who were on it became addicted. Of course, these doctors had known that opioids were and are addictive, but we'll find out as the show unfolds just how Purdue and the Sacklers pitched these doctors into prescribing it to their patients. Dr. Finnix, played by Michael Keaton, is one of those doctors testifying. He testifies that so many of his patients had died from it and he did prescribe it to them. He's kind of the mayor of the town. He knows the people and their families personally. He checks in on them after hours and the people trust him. Betsy is another character played by Caitlin Dever, and I just know that she must be in for a rough time because she's Caitlin Dever in a dramatic role. She's a miner's daughter. She comes from a long line of miners and she's proud of it at first, of being the first as a woman in her family. She's also secretly gay though, which is something that she has to hide from the town and her family, and I assume we're going to see how she has to grapple with that. One day down in the mines, there is a tremor and she falls over, injuring her back pretty badly in the process. It's bad. Then we get to sit in on a meeting between the shareholders and the Sackler family. The shareholders are scared that Richard has vastly overspent on this new drug, $40 million to be exact, and they won't see a return on their investment if this miracle drug turns out to be a bust. Richard assures them that this will work. It's the early 2000s when the US Attorney's Office, headed up by John Brown, start their investigation into Purdue. The investigators tell John about the havoc that Oxy is wreaking in the communities. They all suspect that Purdue might have known how addictive it was and pushed it anyway. They find out as well that the DEA was looking into Purdue, but the case was promptly shut down because Bridget, the DEA agent who was investigating, hit dead ends. She tells them that the label on the drug was a big issue. The FDA had labeled a class 2 narcotic, which is what Oxy was, as less addictive, and it was the first time they'd ever done that. Purdue had a lot of deniability though. It's easy to blame addicts and patients who might misuse the drug or doctors who might overprescribe. The family themselves and the high-level executives would always come up squeaky clean, even when the worst of the dirt was being uncovered. One of the investigators also finds something pretty fascinating. In the patient testimonials, all of the patients who are talking about how the drug Oxy changed their life for the better, they never once mention the name of the drug, even though the video is labeled as being for Oxy and their dosages are shown on the screen. So either the participants were coached into not mentioning OxyContin by name, or Purdue sent out these videos of patients who weren't actually using or talking about Oxy. Either way, it's bad and it smells like fraud. Back in the 90s, we see then how the sales force, spearheaded by Richard, trained all the sales reps to sell this drug to doctors. They're told to push the less than 1% of users become addicted statistic, and they're basically given blank checks to cozy up to the doctors and get them to prescribe this. It looks like it's bordering on bribery, but we know that not all doctors can be bought with expensive gifts and a slick sales pitch, so the sales force do go armed with some fact sheets and, most importantly, the FDA label calling this drug less addictive. A combination of all these things was able to convince even some of the most skeptical doctors like Finnix to have their patients try it. The doctors also don't want their patients suffering in pain, so if all the signs show that this drug is non-addictive, and the FDA even says so, it can solve their patients' problems, why would doctors say no when they can help alleviate suffering? In this show, it's even shown how Purdue and the task force targeted areas where physical laborers such as miners and loggers were, knowing that they were prone to injury. Objectively, this is just smart business, but they were also just sweeping through these towns and saddling already struggling people with even more health issues, crime issues, crippling debt, and of course, a lot of eventual death. During a pretty routine raid, we see how Bridget's character finds a whole lot of OxyContin pills and she starts digging for more information. The results echo what the investigators had said, that in the 3 years since it came on the market, crime has skyrocketed, children have been abandoned, pharmacies have been robbed specifically for Oxy. This then sends her to the DA to find out more about the label approval process and a man named Curtis Wright, the person who approved it. Turns out this Curtis guy went to work for Purdue 2 years after he approved the label. So yeah, the rot runs pretty deep, and the US Attorney's Office decides that they're going to look into Wright as well. To add to this rot sandwich, it turns out that since Purdue had already agreed that the drug could be abused, they didn't need to conduct a study on something they were already admitting to. So yeah, somehow the FDA approved this label without the company having to prove what the label said. By the end of the episode, we see that Betsy is really struggling with her back. She can't afford to take time off. Finnix comes over to her home and gives her a 3-day supply of Oxy, telling her that he's been reading about it, it's safe. She can take 1 pill twice a day. And yeah, that's episode 1 of Dopesick. This show is overflowing with information, but every revelation just keeps getting so much worse. And even if everyone in that family does see the inside of a jail cell eventually, which we know will never happen, it still doesn't feel like it would be enough. This show is bleak, and I want to compare it to Mayor of Easttown and American Rust, because they also have that bleak American town, but quality prestige TV feel. Those are obviously fictional though, whereas this, it kind of kicks you in the gut a bit because you're always thinking of the fact that this family and what they did was real. The people who have suffered and died as a result of their greed and lies continue to suffer and die. It's not easy to watch, and I've seen a couple of more episodes. It does get worse. It's infuriating, heartbreaking, and the scenes with Richard Sackler are just bone-chilling. But yes, I definitely am streaming this. Highly recommended. If you have seen it, as usual, feel free to share your thoughts, and thank you for watching.